The massive viewing ports of Nexus 7 stretched across the courtroom walls, revealing the endless dance of starships and cargo vessels moving through the galaxy's busiest trade hub. Judge Han Wu adjusted his ceremonial robes as he watched a sleek Earth transport dock with the station's outer ring. The hum of artificial gravity generators mixed with the distant sound of alien languages echoing through the corridors. Han had been presiding over the Galactic Commerce Court for 15 years, settling disputes between traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the known systems. Today felt different, though. The air recyclers seemed to work harder, and even the usually chatty maintenance robots moved with unusual urgency through the halls. The courtroom doors slid open with a soft hiss, and two towering blue-skinned aliens entered, their crystalline, eyes reflecting the overhead lights. Between them walked a human woman, her hands bound with energy restraints that glowed softly purple. She moved with quiet dignity despite her circumstances, her dark hair pulled back neatly and her simple, grey jumpsuit marking her as a prisoner. "Dr. Lee Yuna of Earth," announced the court's translation droid, its mechanical voice echoing off the polished metal walls, charged with violation of sacred cultural protocols on the planet Vega Prime during official diplomatic proceedings. Judge Han barely looked up from his datapad as he reviewed the morning's caseload. 3 cargo disputes, 2 immigration violations, and now this cultural breach. He wanted to finish early today since the station's famous noodle vendor had promised to save him some of that spicy Rigelian soup he loved. The lead prosecutor, a being that looked like a walking tree with glowing amber eyes, stepped forward. Its voice came through the translator as a series of melodic chimes. "Honored Judge, this human deliberately refused to participate in the Blessing of Waters ceremony, showing disrespect to our most sacred traditions. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in diplomatic circles." Han sighed and rubbed his temples. These cultural cases always gave him headaches. Every species had their own rules, their own sacred this and forbidden that. Sometimes he wondered how any trade got done at all with so many sensitivities to navigate. "Dr. Lee," he said, finally looking at the woman standing before his bench. She was younger than he expected, maybe in her 30s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the courtroom. "How do you respond to these charges?" "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and measured. "I respectfully declined to participate because—" "Yes or no, Doctor?" Han interrupted, tapping his stylus impatiently against his desk. "Did you refuse to take part in their ceremony?" Lee Yuna's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, but the circumstances were—" "That's all I need to hear." Han was already calculating the standard fine in his head. Cultural violations usually ran about 5,000 credits, enough to sting, but not enough to bankrupt anyone. "The court finds you guilty of violating Vegan cultural protocols. You're fined 8,000 credits and banned from Vega Prime for 1 standard year." The tree-like prosecutor's amber eyes brightened with satisfaction. Its companion, a shorter being covered in silver scales, made what sounded like pleased clicking noises. They gathered their data tablets quickly, as if afraid the judge might change his mind. "Wait," Dr. Lee said, stepping forward despite the energy restraints. "You haven't heard the full story. There were other factors." "The case is closed, Doctor." Han was already moving on to the next file. "Pay the fine at the clerk's office. Next case." As the aliens escorted Lee Yuna toward the exit, she turned back one final time. "Judge Han, I hope you'll reconsider when you learn the truth about what really happened on Vega Prime." The courtroom fell silent, except for the steady hum of the station's life support systems. Han watched through the viewing ports as a massive alien freighter, its hull covered in bioluminescent patterns, slowly maneuvered toward the docking bays. Somewhere in its cargo hold were probably goods from a dozen different worlds, all flowing through Nexus 7 like blood through arteries. His court aide, a helpful robot named Clark 7, rolled up to his bench. "Judge Han, shall I process the payment? Request for Dr. Lee's fine?" "Yes, yes, get it done." Han stretched and stood up, his joints protesting after sitting for hours. "And see if that noodle vendor still has any of that Rigelian soup left." As he walked toward his chambers, Han didn't notice the small group of Earth diplomatic staff who had been watching from the gallery. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and concern as they whispered urgently among themselves before hurrying. Out of the courtroom, the great station continued its eternal rotation, carrying thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, each with their own stories, their own purposes, their own secrets that would soon come to light. The Spicy Rigelian. Soup had lost its flavor by the time Judge Han returned to his private chambers. Through his office window, he watched the endless stream of starships coming and going from Nexus 7's massive docking arms. A sleek Andromedan cruiser was just departing, its silver hull gleaming under the artificial suns that lit the station's exterior. Han loosened his judicial robes and settled into his comfortable chair, ready to review tomorrow's cases. The day had been routine enough, though something about that human woman nagged at the back of his mind. There had been something in her eyes, a quiet confidence that seemed odd for someone caught violating cultural protocols. "Arya," he called, out to his AI assistant, a sophisticated program that had been his constant companion for the past decade. "Pull up the case files for tomorrow." The holographic interface flickered to life above his desk, displaying a three-dimensional array of documents and case summaries. But instead of tomorrow's docket, Arya's synthesized voice carried an unusual tone of concern. "Judge Han, I need to discuss today's case involving Dr. Lee Yuna." Han paused, his hand halfway to his cup of now-cold soup. Arya rarely initiated conversations about closed cases. The AI was programmed to be efficient and direct, not to second-guess judicial decisions. "What about it? Case is closed, fine is processed." "Sir, I've been running background verification protocols on today's defendants, as per standard procedure. Dr. Lee Yuna's file contains some significant information that wasn't presented during the hearing." The holographic display shifted, showing a detailed biography that made Han's stomach drop. Dr. Lee Yuna's image appeared alongside a list of credentials that seemed to scroll endlessly upward. PhD in Xenoanthropology from New Cambridge University, Senior Cultural Advisor to the Galactic Peace Initiative, author of 12 academic papers on interspecies communication, and then Han saw it. Bridges Between Stars, A Human's Journey Through Alien Worlds. The memoir had sold over 2 million copies across human space and had been translated into 47 alien languages. "Arya, why wasn't this information available during the trial?" The prosecution filed a motion to limit biographical information to essential details only. They claimed extensive credentials were irrelevant to the cultural violation charges. The motion was automatically approved by the court system. Han felt his face grow hot. He had approved that motion without reading it, trusting that routine. Procedural requests were just paperwork to be stamped and filed. The holographic display expanded, showing reviews and testimonials from across the galaxy. The Centauri ambassador called it essential reading for anyone seeking to understand the delicate art of interspecies diplomacy. The Vegan Cultural Ministry itself had praised the book as a masterwork of cross-cultural understanding. The same Vegan Cultural Ministry, whose representatives had just prosecuted Dr. Lee in his courtroom. "Arya, show me more about this book." The AI complied, projecting excerpts and chapter summaries into the air around Han's desk. Dr. Lee had spent 5 years traveling to the most isolated and culturally sensitive worlds in known space. She had lived with the crystal beings of Tau Ceti, learned the singing languages of the gas giant inhabitants near Proxima, and had even been granted the rare honor of participating in the sacred fire ceremonies of the desert nomads on Kepler 442b. But it was Chapter 7 that made Han's blood run cold. The waters of Vega, when ceremony becomes coercion. Dr. Lee had written extensively about the blessing of waters ritual, explaining how it had been corrupted by certain political factions to force unwilling participants into binding agreements. "Judge Han," Arya continued, "Dr. Lee's book specifically warns diplomats about situations where the blessing of waters ceremony is used as a legal trap. According to her research, the ritual was traditionally voluntary, but some groups have weaponized it to create forced contracts." Han stood up so quickly, his chair rolled backward into the wall. Outside his window, a massive cargo hauler was approaching the station, its hull scarred from countless hyperspace jumps. Dozens of smaller ships swarmed around it like insects, guiding it toward the heavy-duty docking bays. Arya, pull up the complete case file from today. Everything, including the sealed prosecution documents. The holographic display exploded with information. Police reports, witness statements, diplomatic communications, and finally the smoking gun. A private message between the tree-like prosecutor and an unknown contact, discussing how to neutralize the human interference in some kind of trade negotiation. Dr. Lee hadn't been charged with a cultural violation. She had been set up, framed, by beings who wanted her removed from whatever diplomatic mission she had been conducting on Vega Prime. Han's hands trembled as he reached for his communication device. Through his office speakers, he could hear the normal sounds of the station. Cargo loaders rumbling through corridors, the chatter of alien languages, the hiss of airlocks cycling as ships came and went. But now it all seemed different, tainted by the knowledge of what he had just discovered. The woman he had dismissed so casually was a living legend in diplomatic circles, someone whose work had prevented conflicts and built bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries, and he had treated her like a common criminal. Arya, locate Dr. Lee Yuna immediately and get me a direct line to the station commander. Judge Han's fingers moved rapidly across his holographic interface as he dove deeper into the classified files Arya had unlocked. The space around his desk filled with floating documents, communication logs, and surveillance footage from Vega Prime. What he found made his stomach twist with anger and shame. The incident had occurred 3 weeks ago during the Vega Prime Peace Summit, a gathering meant to end a bloody conflict between the Zephyrian Empire and the Crystalline Federation. These two alien civilizations had been at war for over 50 years, fighting over mining rights in the Outer Rim territories. Millions had died in space battles that left entire solar systems littered with debris. Dr. Lee Yuna had been there as Earth's cultural advisor, helping to navigate the delicate negotiations. The surveillance footage showed her moving gracefully through crowds of alien diplomats, her translation device working overtime as she spoke with towering insectoid Zephyrians and the living crystal beings of the Federation. Arya, show me what happened during the ceremony. The hologram shifted to display the grand ceremonial chamber on Vega Prime. Massive columns of living coral stretched toward a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of the planet's 3 moons. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species filled the chamber, all gathered to witness what should have been a historic peace signing. At the center of the room stood an ornate fountain filled with sacred waters from both warring worlds. The blessing of Waters ceremony was meant to symbolize unity, with representatives from each side drinking from the same source to show their commitment to peace. But Han could see the trap now. Hidden in the ancient ceremonial language were binding clauses that would have given the Zephyrian war faction exclusive rights to all disputed territories. The crystal beings would have been tricked into signing away their ancestral homes while thinking they were participating in a peace ritual. Dr. Lee had figured it out. The footage showed her stepping forward just as the ceremony was about to begin, her face calm but determined. She spoke quietly to the Crystalline Federation's lead negotiator, a being that looked like a walking diamond sculpture with eyes like stars. She's warning them, Han whispered to himself, watching as the crystal being's luminous form flickered with understanding. The Zephyrian prosecutors had been furious when Dr. Lee refused to drink from the ceremonial waters, publicly declaring the ritual to be legally compromised. Her refusal had caused other participants to question the ceremony's true purpose, and within hours, the hidden clauses had been exposed. Arya, show me the communication logs from the prosecution team. The evidence was damning. Private messages between the tree-like prosecutor and a shadowy corporation called Stellar Dynamics revealed the entire conspiracy. Stellar Dynamics had been selling weapons to both sides of the conflict for decades, making enormous profits from the ongoing war. Her peace treaty would destroy their business model. One message made Han's blood boil. The human woman is too smart. She's ruined everything. Use the cultural violation charges to discredit her. Make sure she can never interfere in our operations again. Han stood up and paced to his window, watching as a damaged warship limped toward the station's repair bays. Its hull was scorched black from plasma cannon fire, probably another casualty from the ongoing Zephyrian Federation conflict. How many ships like this could have been saved if Dr. Lee's warning had been heeded sooner? Arya, what happened after Dr. Lee exposed the ceremony? The peace negotiations collapsed immediately. Both sides returned to their fleets and resumed hostilities within 48 hours. However, sir, there's more. The holographic display showed recent battle reports from the Outer Rim, 3 major engagements in the past 2 weeks, with casualty reports that made Han sick to his stomach. Entire space colonies had been evacuated as the fighting spread to previously neutral systems. But buried in the tactical reports was something interesting. The Crystalline Federation had begun using new defensive strategies that seemed remarkably effective against Zephyrian attack patterns. Their ships were surviving battles they should have lost, and their civilian populations were being evacuated with an efficiency that surprised military analysts. Sir, these tactical improvements match recommendations from Dr. Lee's classified report on Zephyrian military psychology. She filed it with Earth Command 2 days before her arrest. Even while being framed and prosecuted, Dr. Lee had continued working to minimize the damage from the renewed conflict. Her insights were saving lives even as corrupt prosecutors tried to destroy her reputation. Han's communication device chimed with an urgent message from Station Commander Park Jin. Han, I need to see you immediately. We have a problem with the Vega Prime case. I'm already aware, Commander. How bad is it? Bad enough that we have Stellar Dynamics mercenaries docked at Bay 7 and they're asking questions about Dr. Lee's current location. Something tells me they're not here to apologize. Through his window, Han could see the sleek black ships that had arrived during his investigation. They bore no national markings, just the corporate logo of Stellar Dynamics. War profiteers who had orchestrated this entire conspiracy to keep their bloody business alive. Commander, we need to find Dr. Lee before they do. Judge Han rushed through the corridors of Nexus 7, his robes flowing behind him as he made his way to the secure detention levels. The station's artificial gravity felt heavier somehow, as if the weight of his mistakes was pulling him down. Emergency. Lights flickered along the walls as security teams moved past him, their boots echoing off the metal floors. He found Dr. Lee Yuna in holding Cell 7, sitting calmly on the narrow bench with a datapad in her hands. Despite everything that had happened, she looked composed, almost peaceful. When she saw him approaching, she set the device aside and stood up. Judge Han, she said quietly. I was wondering when you'd come. Han's throat felt dry as the cells. Energy barrier deactivated. Dr. Lee, I owe you an apology. A massive one. She stepped out of the cell, and for the first time, Han noticed the small scars on her hands and arms. These weren't from accidents or violence. They were ritual marks, ceremonial scarifications from dozens of different alien cultures. Each one represented a bond of trust, a bridge built between species. I've been reading your book, Han said, holding up his datapad, all night, every page. Dr. Lee's memoir wasn't just a collection of travel stories. It was a masterclass in understanding the deepest fears and hopes that drove different species across the galaxy. She had lived with the hive-minded insects of Proxima b, learning their collective consciousness while maintaining her individual human identity. She had mediated between the energy beings of the Veil Nebula and the solid matter races they couldn't physically touch. But it was her account of the Andromedan crisis that made Han truly understand what humanity brought to the galaxy. The silicon-based life forms on Kepler 438b, Han said, as they walked toward his chambers. You prevented their war with the carbon-based colonies by finding something no one else could see. Dr. Lee nodded, her eyes distant with memory. Both sides thought they were fighting over territory, but they were really fighting over loneliness. The silicon beings had never encountered life so different from themselves. The carbon colonists were terrified of being absorbed or transformed. They needed to see that difference didn't mean destruction. Through the station's viewing ports, Han could see the constant flow of ships representing hundreds of species. Methane breathers from the outer gas giants, plasma entities contained in magnetic fields, machine intelligences housed in crystalline matrices. The galaxy was an impossible mixture of life forms that should have been at each other's throats constantly. How do you do it? Han asked. How do humans find connections where others only see differences? Dr. Lee paused at a viewing port, watching as a massive whale-like creature swam through space alongside a mechanical escort vessel. The bioship belonged to the Cetacean Alliance, while its companion was clearly from the Machine Collective. Natural enemies in most species' thinking, yet here they were traveling together. We're adaptable, she said simply. Most species evolved to fit specific environments, specific ways of thinking. Humans evolved to survive anywhere, to learn from anyone. We're not the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we're the most flexible. Han's datapad chimed with an update from Arya. The AI had been analyzing galactic conflict data from the past 50 years, looking for patterns that involved human mediators. Judge Han, Arya's voice echoed from the pad, my analysis is complete. In every major interspecies conflict, where humans served as mediators, the resolution time was reduced by an average of 73%. Casualty rates dropped by 85%. The numbers were staggering. The Rigelian trade wars, the Centauri succession crisis, the Great Silence of the Outer Rim. In each case, human diplomats had found solutions that saved millions of lives and prevented entire star systems from being destroyed. But there's more, Dr. Lee said, pointing to a section of her memoir displayed on Han's pad. We don't just prevent wars, we create something new. She showed him images from the Harmony Station project, a joint venture between 12 different species that had been impossible until human coordinators found ways to merge their incompatible technologies. The station now served as a model for cooperative development across the galaxy. Every species brings something unique to the galaxy, Dr. Lee continued. The Zephyrians have incredible military precision. The Crystalline Federation understands energy manipulation better than anyone. The Vegans have mastered biological engineering. But humans, we see how all these pieces fit together. Han's communication device suddenly blared with an emergency alert. Commander Park Jin's voice crackled through the speakers. All security teams to Docking Bay 7. We have armed hostiles attempting to board the station. They're looking for Dr. Lee. Through the viewing port, Han could see the sleek black ships of Stellar Dynamics moving aggressively toward the station's docking arms. Their weapon systems were powered up, and smaller fighter craft were launching from their cargo bays. They really don't want me talking about what happened on Vega Prime, Dr. Lee said calmly, watching the approaching threat. Han felt something he hadn't experienced in years, not fear, but determination. This woman represented everything that made humanity special in the galaxy, and he wasn't going to let war profiteers destroy her. Dr. Lee, can you prevent another war? She smiled, and for the first time since meeting, Han saw the quiet confidence that had made her a legend among diplomats. Judge Han, that's exactly what I plan to do. The emergency klaxons echoed through Nexus 7 as Judge Han and Dr. Lee hurried toward the main courtroom. Outside the viewing ports, Stellar Dynamics fighters circled the station like angry wasps, their weapon systems glowing with threatening energy. But Han had a plan that would expose the conspiracy to the entire galaxy. Arya, activate the emergency broadcast system, Han commanded as they entered the courtroom. I want every ship, every station, and every planetary government to receive this transmission. The courtroom filled with aliens from across the station. Word had spread quickly about the standoff, and beings of all species crowded into the gallery. The crystalline translator from the Federation caught the light like a living prism. Several Zephyrian merchants stood alongside their traditional enemies, united in curiosity about what would happen next. Dr. Lee took her place at the defendant's table, but this time she wasn't in restraints. She had changed into her diplomatic uniform, a simple blue outfit that bore the insignia of the Galactic Peace Initiative. Her calm presence seemed to radiate throughout the room. Citizens of the galaxy, Han began, his voice carrying across subspace to millions of listeners, today I must correct a grave injustice. Dr. Lee Yuna was not guilty of any cultural violation. She was framed by war profiteers who wanted to silence her voice of peace. The holographic displays around the courtroom lit up with evidence. Communication logs, financial records, and battle footage painted a clear picture of stellar dynamics conspiracy. The audience gasped as they saw how the corporation had manipulated both sides of the Zephyrian Federation conflict. But this case reveals something more important than corruption, Han continued, turning to face Dr. Lee. It shows us what makes humanity truly special in our galaxy. Through the viewing ports, Han could see more ships arriving, not just stellar dynamics vessels, but also Federation crystal ships and Zephyrian war cruisers. The entire sector was watching this broadcast, and the warring fleets had stopped fighting to listen. Dr. Lee, Han said, tell the galaxy what you saw on Vega Prime. Dr. Lee stood up, her voice clear and strong. I saw two species who had forgotten why they were fighting. The Zephyrians and the Federation weren't enemies because they hated each other. They were enemies because they were afraid of each other. She gestured to the mixed crowd in the courtroom. Look around you. Every species here evolved differently, thinks differently, fears different things. But we're all in this room together listening to each other. That's what makes the galaxy beautiful. Commander Park Jin's voice came through the communication system. Judge Han, the stellar dynamics ships are demanding we hand over Dr. Lee. They're threatening to open fire. Han smiled grimly. Patch them through to the courtroom. Let them explain themselves to the galaxy. The main screen flickered to life, showing the scarred face of a human mercenary captain. His eyes were cold, the kind that came from years of profiting from other people's suffering. This is Captain Ryu of Stellar Dynamics. The woman you're protecting is a terrorist who has disrupted legitimate business operations. Hand her over. Immediately, Dr. Lee stepped forward. Captain Ryu, the galaxy is watching. Tell them about your legitimate business. Tell them how you've been selling weapons to both sides of every major conflict for the past 30 years. The mercenary's face grew red with anger. You have no proof of Arya. Display the financial records, Han interrupted. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, shipping manifests, and communication logs showed how Stellar Dynamics had been fueling conflicts across the galaxy. Every time peace negotiations started, mysterious weapon shipments would arrive to reignite the fighting. But something unexpected happened. The crystalline Federation delegate in the courtroom began to glow brighter, its internal light pulsing with what Han recognized as excitement. The Zephyrian merchants started clicking their mandibles in the rhythm. That meant agreement. Captain Ryu came a new voice over the communication system. This time it was Admiral Kim of the Zephyrian fleet. My ships have been analyzing your weapon signatures. The plasma cannons that killed my brother in the Battle of Rigel 7 came from your factories. Another voice joined in. This one from the Federation fleet. The kinetic bombardment that destroyed our colony on Kepler 442b used your guidance systems. Han watched through the viewing ports as the two fleets that had been fighting each other for decades slowly turned their weapons toward the Stellar Dynamics ships. The war profiteers had made enemies of everyone. Dr. Lee, Han said, you once wrote that humanity's greatest strength is seeing connections where others see only differences. What connection do you see here? She looked out at the mixed crowd. Of aliens, then at the fleets visible through the viewing ports. I see former enemies realizing they were manipulated into fighting each other. I see species that can choose peace over profit. The Stellar Dynamics ships, suddenly outnumbered, 50-1, began retreating toward the hyperspace jump point. Captain Ryu's transmission cut off abruptly as his fleet fled the system. Dr. Lee, Han said formally, this court officially overturns all charges against you. Furthermore, I'm recommending you for the Galactic Peace Medal for your service to interspecies understanding. The courtroom erupted in cheers from dozens of different species. The sound was chaotic but beautiful, like an orchestra where every instrument played a different song that somehow created perfect harmony. Outside, the Zephyrian and Federation fleets were already opening communication channels with each other. The real peace talks would begin tomorrow, but Han could see that the fighting was truly over this time. As the broadcast ended and the crowds began to disperse, Dr. Lee approached the judge's bench. Thank you, Judge Han. But the real victory isn't in this courtroom. It's out there, in all those ships, learning to trust each other. Han nodded, watching. As alien crews began exchanging cultural gifts through airlocks, a sight that would have been impossible just days before. Dr. Lee, what's next for you? She smiled, looking out at the vast galaxy beyond the station's walls. There are still so many species that haven't learned to see each other as friends instead of threats. The galaxy is a big place and there's a lot of work to do. As Dr. Lee walked toward the docking bay where her ship waited, Han implemented his final reform. Every case that came before his court would now require complete background checks and cultural context reviews. Never again would ignorance and prejudice masquerade as justice in his courtroom. The galaxy was vast and filled with countless different forms of life. But humanity had found their place in it, not as conquerors or rulers, but as the bridge builders, the peacemakers, the ones who could see connections where others saw only differences. The Endi,